rightfully so, people spend a lot of time on their retirement plan, thinking through what the expenses are that they're going to have in retirement, how much money they need every year, how much money they're going to need over 20, 30, 40 years. But you know what? Your retirement plan is only as good as the data that you put in it. And unfortunately, there's some big expenses that a lot of people forget to put in their retirement plan. And unfortunately, that can lead to mistakes. It can lead to scary realizations and to being shocked. And I don't want you to have any scary realizations. So let's jump in, and I'm going to share with you 4 of the most common expenses that people forget about or underestimate in their retirement plan. And I've been a financial advisor for 20 years, and these are the ones that I've seen have really moved the needle and can be very unpleasant surprises, to put it mildly. Okay, let's jump in. And you know, the first one is Medicare is great. I'm glad we have Medicare, but Medicare is not free. And you know what? Medicare many times is not cheap. You have to be very careful. And so let's talk about one of the first ones. The first one is with Medicare Part A. And Medicare Part A is for the hospital. And it's really important for you to know that you have a deductible. We all have a deductible. I'm soon going to have this deductible with you on Part A of $1,600 per benefit period. And, you know, many of us will look at that and say, well, you know, benefit period, that has to be the deductible per year. But it's not. It's per incident that puts you into the hospital. So you could have 2, 3, or 4 of these if you have a recurring situation that takes you into the hospital. And that quickly adds up to real money. And another thing that adds up is Medicare Part B, as in boy, and D as in dog. Part B is generally for your hospital visits, and Part D is for your prescriptions. And these have monthly payments, premiums associated with them. And they're not insignificant. It's $165 a month, which is actually $5 less, believe it or not, than what it was in 2022. And for some of you, you've got a big surprise coming in, and that's for what's called Irma, which is income relative monthly adjusted amount. So it's basically if you make a lot of money. Now, when I say a lot of money, it's like $200,000 plus for a couple married filing jointly. But it is there, and it can get up to $500 a month, depending on how much you make. So just be aware that it's there. Not many of us are going to trigger it. If we do trigger it, it's kind of the good news, bad news. But it also relates to how your money is saved. If all of your money is saved in a regular IRA, in a regular 401k, and as you take money out, it's going to be taxable, you could trigger those Irma triggers. And unfortunately, they're kind of cliffs, right? It goes from 165 to whatever the next number is, which I believe is like 250 or higher. I should say I'm not a Medicare specialist. I'm just saying you should include medical expenses. You should look into that. And importantly, in the video, I'm going to leave a great resource for you from the Medicare organization, which will give you much more clarity on what the costs are associated with it. Okay, let's go to the second one. And the second most often overlooked expense is, you know, most of us, in fact, about 80% of 65-year-olds, we own our homes. And, you know, we're getting older, and probably our homes are getting older too. So unfortunately, there's surprises with keeping our house well maintained. And it can get quite pricey, actually. And so I think what most people should be thinking about including is at least 1% of the fair market value of your house. Now, you might have paid $250,000 for your house several years ago, but now it might be worth $500,000 or $700,000, right? Well, the cost to maintain the house, the cost of the craftsmen that come out to do the repairs, the cost to replace the roof, all of that is getting more expensive. So a rule of thumb is 1% of the fair market value of your house. And Bob Vitas, that does a show on home improvement, he would say 1% to 4%. And just like I'm not a Medicare expert, I'm also not a home improvement expert, but Bob is. So he would say 1 to 4% is what we should budget for that. Okay. And then the third item is just other quote unquote one-time expenses. Boy, it's amazing how many one-time expenses there are out there, right? I mean, many of us have kids. My kids are adults now. They're grown and out of the house. And I think many of my viewers are in that situation. But every now and then things come up, and as their parents, we're tempted to help. And I would caution to say that's optional, right? You got to make sure that your retirement is solid, but those can be one-time expenses. Occasionally something happens to your car and the car mechanic says, gee, it's going to cost more to repair it than what it's worth. And so you find yourself shopping for a new used car or a new car. And that can sneak up on you and happen more often than what you think. Also, many of us are in this situation where we still have aging parents that we're helping out with. And depending on your parents' health situation, and what their retirement savings looks like, we might find ourselves helping out in there. Again, kind of one-time expenses. Also, on a happier note, one-time expenses like, a friend asks you, hey, would you like to go cycling through France and Italy with me this summer? And it's like, wow, that's a great experience. I'd love to be able to do that. But, it's pricey. So it's a one-time expense. So I would just kind of factor in, particularly in the first 10 years of your retirement, factor in more expenses for travel. And then maybe as you get older, maybe expect an unexpected trip, maybe with the grandkids, maybe a Disney cruise or something like that. But just factor those in. And the next one is really, really important. And in fact, Fidelity tells us the average 65-year-old couple should budget $300,000 a year for this not a year, I'm sorry, $300,000 over the remainder of our lifetime for a couple for this category. And unfortunately, 70% of us are going to find ourselves needing this at some point, and the expenses can be quite high. I know I haven't told you what this is yet. I'll tell you in a second, but I want to share what the expenses are. It's $5,000 a month for the in-house version of this, and can be $10,000 a month for the inpatient type services, and that's long-term care. Believe it or not, what the Department of Health and Human Services say that 70% of us are going to need long-term care. 70% of people 65 and older are going to need long-term care at some time in our lives. And, it can be very pricey. And if you're 50 and above, you still can buy long-term care insurance, but it gets more expensive the older that you get. And frankly, there's a lot of exclusions included with it. And you want to look at what is the maximum cap, because I think a lot of us will be surprised at how little it actually long-term care insurance covers, how many exceptions are out there, and how costly it is. So I encourage, none of this is financial advice for you. I don't know your situation, so I can't give you that. But I do encourage you to work with a fee-only financial advisor to think about, or an accountant, or an insurance specialist, a Medicare specialist, based on the things I've been talking here on, to find out more about your situation. And another thing that I think we all need to be thinking about is, as we get closer to retirement age, is the things that we should stop doing in order to enjoy our life more. And that's what this video here talks about. That video has over 100,000 views, great comments. I think you're going to find it super helpful to give you some thoughts about how do you enjoy the journey up to retirement and in retirement. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.